Recording.
We're shooting out the driveway here. Let's get over a couple quick facts about this one. 683 pound wet weight, 30.5 inch seat height, 1,679 cc's, or a 102.45 cubic inch motor, 5-speed transmission with a shaft drive output, dual wave disc brakes in the front with dual 6-piston Brembo calipers. This is a 4-gallon fuel tank. This one is featured in the candy red, and this bike makes 200 horsepower, 123 foot-pound of torque on a V4 power plant. These facts come to you from bikeswithaz.com. If anyone from bikes.com is watching, hook your boy up with a t-shirt or something, man. So it does have a cat delete pipe with Voodoo slip-ons. Gives the bike all that power it needs. We also did Hole Shot's big air mod to this. So it's a K&N drop-in filter, airbox funnel is removed, and then also some holes drilled into the actual cover of the airbox as well to increase that airflow. It does also have the OEM Boulevard, I think they call it, windscreen. We also did a full ECU flash from Jet, J-E-T-T, Jet Tuning. We also did a dual clutch spring mod on this to beef up that factory clutch and allow it to take the power that this bike has. If you don't know anything about Vmaxes, again, these bikes define the muscle bike class. And these Gen 2s are absolute monsters for motorcycles. 200 horsepower on a cruiser style bike is absolutely insane. You almost have to be insane to ride one. But myself personally, that's the biggest thing. Here's how I got onto a Vmax. I had a Gen 1 at some point here. Sport bikes, I've had S1000s, I've had ZX14s, I've had a bunch of really fast bikes. And the issue with cruisers was I wanted to be comfortable, but I didn't want to lose that sport bike pep. That, you know, just that power that comes with owning a sport bike. And the Vmax hits home right there for that. I mean, this thing is an absolute monster. It's a blast to ride. And, you know, this, I don't think I'm going to be getting rid of this one in the foreseeable future. But anyways, Yamaha came out with the Gen 1 Vmax. That was a 1200. Those bikes were awesome, but small frame, small brakes. You had to brace the frame if you started to get anything over stock power to it. Otherwise, the frames would actually flex. And I had a Gen 1 that had a Stage 7 kit on it, and it just wasn't. It was too much bike. It was too much, not even bike. It was too much motor for too little bike. When Yamaha redesigned and brought out the Gen 2s, they did it absolutely perfect. Bigger motor, bigger brakes, bigger frame. Everything is just the way the Gen 1 should have been. The only thing I wish they would have done was they would have made this fuel tank bigger. With having only a 4-gallon fuel tank, I mean, this thing passes everything but a gas station. It gets acclaimed as far as the manufacturer. They claim 27 miles to the gallon. Typically, I'm seeing closer, especially if I'm riding this thing, spirited riding, I'm seeing closer to like 23, 24 miles to the gallon. So that's pretty pitiful for a motorcycle. But I mean, if you're buying a Vmax, you're not looking to go get every mile per gallon out of it. You're looking to get the mile per hour out of it. So, you know, whatever. Oh, another mod we did, I'm just seeing it now. I forgot about it. I did do Pathfinder's LED front end conversion. And I also did a Competition Works LED integrated taillight on this too. So those are the other things I did. I plan on doing the Halo kit on this. I'm not going to use Mike Kemp's kit. He wants too much money, and he might comment on this because he's pretty popular, or he's pretty vocal on Vmax videos, but I'm not going to use his kit. He wants too much money for what it is, and you can achieve it yourself pretty easily. So at any rate here, that's just the acceleration on this thing. These Vmaxes are an absolute blast. Here's where the Vmax comes into me. These bikes can take leader bikes up to like over 100 miles an hour. These bikes take ZX14s. I mean, the V-Rod, that's not even in the same brand as this. It's just not even, it's not even fair. And one thing too, as I was going through the spec sheet, I don't ever think about anything when I'm looking at these. When I'm looking at bikes, I think about everything in cc's. So that's one where Harley kind of, in my opinion, I think Harley hides behind how small their motors have realistically been, because they go cubic inches and everyone else goes cc's. So this thing was only 102.45 cubic inches. I mean, I'm in 4th gear. Let's go down to 3rd gear. I'm in 3rd gear doing 45 miles an hour. Now, let's see your Harley 103 do this. It's not. The 103 Harleys are, you know, they're pretty good motors, but they ain't gonna have power like this. I mean, that's one thing, man. This Yamaha Vmax is an absolute monster of a machine. And here's the cool thing with owning a Vmax. Everybody knows about them. No matter where you go, I always have at least one guy who's either had one, or his girlfriend, you know, his cousin's boyfriend had one. You know, they always distantly know about them. They always know how much of a monster these things are. And I mean, yeah, they're just cool bikes. But at any rate, if you are familiar with our YouTube channel, this is a new setup that we're just trying out here. Instead of my GoPro Hero 7 Black mounted with the external mic adapter and everything, I am using Sena 10c EVO. You might be able to see it there now, but I am using a Sena 10c EVO integrated. It's their communication headset, but you can also use it for logging. So, not sure how this turns out, but I know for sure, because I have done a little bit of test footage, it's definitely a lot shakier. I don't get that on my GoPro, so I apologize if the image is not as crisp as you're used to seeing on my videos. But let's talk about the Vmax, man. If you're looking for a Vmax, the biggest bike that you're going to see that guys talk about and compare the Vmax to is the Ducati Diavel. Now, myself personally, I've never ridden a Ducati Diavel. It's on the list. We'll get one here sooner than later. But at this point in time, I haven't ridden one. I'm not a big Ducati fan. They're expensive. Like motorcycles, especially, like, you know, they're expensive enough, but I don't want to put that Ducati tax on my parts or my cost of ownership. So typically guys are comparing the Vmax Gen 2s to the Ducatis, and I've seen guys back and forth. I mean, myself personally, I mean, you're not going to beat this on Yamaha. This bike doesn't call for a valve adjustment until 45,000 miles. That's nuts. I mean, most of your bikes today, I mean, there's bikes that are calling for valve adjustments within the first 10,000 miles, within the first 5,000 miles. 45,000 miles, Yamaha knows what these motors are capable of. And actually, too, in talking with my local Yamaha dealer about the Vmax, they did tell me that when these bikes first came out, these things were slated to make around 230 horsepower. They couldn't keep tires on the bikes. The bikes just wouldn't hook. They just could not put the bike out. So they actually toned this thing down. So that's one really big selling point to me, is that this isn't a motor that's, you know, reliably operating, you know, meant to reliably operate 175 horsepower, and they squeezed it out to 200. This is a motor that's meant to operate at 230 horsepower, and they actually turned it down. And, I mean, this thing's a monster. I couldn't imagine it with an extra 30 horsepower. Now, you might be wondering, this bike makes 200 horsepower stock. Why did you do an exhaust and do an ECU flash and all that stuff? Well, this thing comes with a whole pile of babysitters on it out of the box. You don't get full throttle in all your gears. I mean, the exhaust is really restrictive, and it sounds like a shop vac. This thing didn't have a terrible exhaust, I guess, to be completely fair. But it's not going to have that full-fledged tone that this bike, when you're looking at it, deserves to sound like. And the air mod, that just goes with it. I mean, at that point, if you're doing the ECU flash, you're going to spend a couple $100 on an ECU flash. You might as well just do the air mod while you're in there too. Now, if you're watching this and you are familiar with Vmaxes, you might be wondering, why didn't you use the Nash flash? That's the flash that everyone on Vmax says, Nash flash, Nash flash. Meh. Sure. But I would be shocked if you could justify an extra $450 having a Nash flash done over the $250 flash I had done by Jet Tuning. I don't see it. Maybe you do. But at any rate, this bike is just a technological monster as well. So this little OLED screen down here, it shows where your fuel, it shows your mileage, clock, gear indicator, and also it shows your bike's temperature as well, as it has have a couple trips. But in this too, it actually will show you can go in and set trip counters for oil and also tire changes, and then it has like another 5 or 6 that you can set for your own personal things, be it coolant, be it spark plugs, anything like that. You can set them for your own stuff there. It also too does have in this, you can actually change this display that it doesn't show this one, and it shows a little bit more in-depth stuff, but it's not necessarily anything that I would be really interested in seeing on a daily ridden bike. But it would be good to have, especially if you're running this thing in a track, I would say, more or less. Be it a drag track, more than likely, that I'd be more interested in seeing. I gotta remember exactly what it is, but it shows a bunch of other different things in there. And two, this thing does have a full diagnostics mode, where you can actually go in and you can trigger all the modules, the relays, all of that stuff there to see where your bike's at, and if you are having a problem, what exactly is going on with it. If you do have check engine lights, it also will read those to you too. That's one issue I did have at first, is I did throw a check engine light after doing the exhaust install, and a couple little things. It takes about 5 minutes to look up on the internet. You can figure out how to get in there and figure out exactly what's going on, reset that light, and get your bike back on the road. But now handling wise on this thing, this bike is an absolute blast in the back roads. I mean, it is a big, heavy bike, don't get me wrong, but when you're talking cruisers, even though this thing has the power of a sport bike, it still is a cruiser. And it's a muscle cruiser, to be all, to be completely fair. And I mean, typically your muscle bikes aren't going to be, you got to think of a muscle bike like a muscle car. Your muscle cars aren't back road cars, but this thing does super well on back roads. I mean, it really, really, this thing does super well on back roads. I mean, it is really a fun bike on the back roads, with the exception of, you do have to remember, this thing has a whole pile of power. So even just here, I mean, I'm at 4,000 RPMs, and if I crack on this thing, I'll break the back tire loose. So with that there, you have a lot of power that goes through this little grip right here. So that's the only thing you gotta have to get used to on a back road, is you don't have that kind of forgiving throttle or forgiveness in the throttle, or if you mess up. So just little things like that. But for the most part, man, I love riding this thing on back roads. It's actually been a blast, especially as far as cruisers go. I find this to be the most amply equipped cruiser for back road riding. It has a tall riding position, a nice upright riding position as well. Very, very, very comfortable. I don't know necessarily how comfortable it would be for a backseat person, and myself personally, I wouldn't want anybody on the back unless I did have a sissy bar. Just because if their grip lets up and you get a twitchy throttle, like I just did there on purpose, might make for a little bit of a rodeo situation for that person sitting on the back seat. But yeah, hands down, this is one of the most, if not the most powerful cruiser on the market today. And it's, it's just all around, it's an awesome bike. Comfort wise, I could ride this thing all day. I have ridden this thing all day before, and I will continue to do it again. It really is a comfortable motorcycle to ride, even given all of that power. Handling, again, this thing does great on back roads. The only thing I would say about this bike handling wise is, or not necessarily handling wise, but is, feature wise, that I'm not a fan of, is the fact that it does have such a small gas tank. That is honestly my only complaint about the Vmax, the Gen 2 Vmax 1700, is the absurdly, in my opinion, absurdly small gas tank. This thing should have at least a 5-gallon tank, just because, especially too, with the amount of power it puts out, you could actually ride somewhere, I typically am filling up around 80 or 90 miles on the trip. So that kind of sucks. I mean, I'm typically, actually, I'm realistically, I'm more or less filling up around 70 miles when I'm typically driving. I can get up in the 80 mile per hour range. But again, I'm not running it down to its sucking fumes either. You know, I like to fill up earlier. I don't ever want to run out of gas. Pros and cons of the Vmax. Let's do the cons, because that's the quickest one. The gas tank. Outside of that, I don't have a complaint in the world about this bike. Love it. Pros, super fast, super fun, super reliable. Made by Yamaha, so you know the thing's going to last forever. That's the other thing too with the Vmax. It just doesn't stop pulling. Most of your bikes are going to start to let out. This thing is making peak horsepower at 9,000 RPM. And it's super easy to see with this huge tack. Old school, hot rod style, big shift light there. This thing is just, it makes all the power in the world, and it keeps making it. It just doesn't want to quit. But yeah, so at any rate, if you are looking for a Vmax and you're wondering, going back and forth on the fence, buy one. You can't buy power like this for cheap. Unless your buddy has a Vmax or has some kind of turbocharged Busa or something to that effect, you're going to have the fastest bike of your friends group. If you're looking at Vmaxes and you're wondering if you should buy one or not, if you're asking me, I say buy one. They're awesome. I love this. Like I said, definitely my favorite bike, especially here recently. You know, having my dealership, it's pretty rare that I actually stick with a motorcycle. Pretty often I'm switching bikes a lot. And this one I've had for going on 2 months now, and I haven't put it for sale yet. I don't foresee myself doing it, if I'm being completely honest. I just like the bike that much. I mean, all right. That concludes this short little test ride. Me talking about Vmaxes. At any rate, if you can, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You stay up to date going on with everything here at Siegfried's Motorwerx. And as always, have a great rest of your day.